Hello once again and welcome inside. It is the Red Mile Rundown. I am John Eastup alongside Robert Munich, and this is episode 3 of the show. Lots to get into on the show this week, Robert. How excited are you for the show, and how you doing today?
Yeah, dude, I'm absolutely pumped. We're right in the middle of preseason. There's lots of exciting things going on in Flamesland, and I know we got some pretty fun topics to dive into today. So let's get after it.
Yeah, for sure. Like lots of people complain about how long preseason is. I'm one of them, but it actually goes pretty quick when you boil it down. We're already halfway through preseason, so we got lots of things we want to dive into today. Let's start with that fourth line battle, Robert. You brought that up to me in the topics conversation. Where would you like to go with this conversation here?
Well, I was just thinking, like, filling out the fourth line, filling out the rest of the forward lineup is probably the most interesting thing that's going on in training camp right now because you have so many guys who have stepped up and have performed, and
Mhm.
you have a couple guys who haven't as well. So it makes it super interesting. So when I was looking at the lineup, there's pretty much two spots open right now, and that's fourth line center, fourth line wing.
Mhm.
So who's fighting for those spots right now? So you got Matt Coronado, Adam Klapka, Sam Honzig, Jacob Pelletier, Kevin Rooney, Dryden Hunt, Walker Dewar. I would say those are probably the main candidates for those positions right now. And there's a couple guys that have really stepped up and shown that they should probably earn those spots. Like I'll bring up one right now. I'll start with Adam Klapka on
Mhm.
Saturday in that preseason game. I thought he was like one of the most effective forwards on the Flames, despite the fact he played the least amount of ice time. But he had those two massive hits. He scored a goal. He pissed off the entire Vancouver Canucks team, which he's done all preseason long. And I think he's really putting like a great effort forward to earn that kind of wing spot on the fourth line right now. And one line I kind of want to throw out there that I thought would be kind of fun to discuss would be Lomberg, he's a lock. Like
Yeah.
he's probably going to play every single game. And then maybe move Martin Pospisil to the fourth line center and have
Yes.
Klapka on the other wing. And I'm like, that would be a crazy fourth line. Like that line would be terrible to play against because Lomberg's a real jerk on the ice, which is awesome. We all saw what Pospisil did last year. People hate him around the league, and then now Adam
Mhm.
Klapka is also slowly becoming like one of the more like hated guys out there. I'm like, that fourth line could really do some damage. So, shout out to Adam Klapka. I think he's been awesome in this training camp so far.
I love that someone else has this take other than me having Pospisil as your fourth line center. And it's no disrespect to Pospisil. This is actually very much praising what Pospisil brings to your lineup. So I'm glad someone else thinks this besides me. I like him between Mantha and Huberdeau, but that role can be filled by a couple of other guys that we can get into later in the show, namely one Connor Zary. But I think Klapka, going back to your point, Klapka has lapped some of these people in the field. I haven't seen Walker Dewar this preseason. Like literally haven't seen him. So I think he's been lapped by Adam Klapka. I think Adam Klapka puts forth a fourth line role more so than the Coronados or the Pelches or even the Honziks that people like to bring up on that line. And I think he's a better fit on that line than a Kevin Rooney. I still think Rooney is in this conversation based on he's a natural center. He can win faceoffs and he can penalty kill for you. So he does bring a lot to the table. But I really think Adam Klapka's put his name, if not in pen on that line, it's very close to being that way based on what all he brought. That game against Vancouver told you all you need to know about Klapka. He's been doing that all preseason. He's doing it in practice, and he's in every single lineup. They cannot help but play this guy in these preseason games. He's going to go again Monday night when the Flames have another preseason. He's going to play again because of what he brings to the table and what they're seeing from him has progressed his game so much. And he's a lot more effective in my eyes than what we saw last year from Klapka. He maybe was a little starstruck or NHL struck when he first came up last year. He looks very comfortable playing now. He looks very composed in his game. And it's more than just him hitting people. He's responsible in the role he's been asked to play. I think he's firmly in this conversation. I love that you put Pospisil in that center position. End of the day, you kind of know how the Flames think, and it's still probably going to be Rooney there. But even if that's a rotational spot for Rooney and Klapka, not bad. That's decent depth for your fourth line. I just really want to see from Jacob Pelletier now. Hey, hold on. I'm still part of this conversation. He's in a big spot now for the rest of his training camp / preseason if he wants to get a job here on the fourth line. What are your thoughts on Jacob Pelletier here? He has to have himself a big game against everyone he plays against now from here into the start of the season.
Yeah, in the preseason so far, I think he's played like one solid game. It was in Abbotsford. I thought he was half decent, but outside of that, like you've really barely noticed him. On Saturday when the Flames played the Canucks, he had the second least amount of ice time among Flames forwards. I think it was only behind Adam Klapka. So, that kind of showed that the coaching staff wasn't really too happy with what they were seeing, because Pelche is the kind of guy that you're probably going to throw out there for a lot of ice time in the preseason. The fact he didn't get a lot of ice time was kind of concerning, but like what you do with Jacob Pelche, I think is fascinating, because there's really three options. There's either one, you find a way to get him in the lineup, whether that's on a fourth line, or you find a way to put him with Backlund and Coleman, something like that. Two, you keep him on the NHL roster, but he starts in the press box and you kind of wait for an injury, or you wait for someone to underperform. Or three, you put him on waivers and you risk losing him, despite the fact that him playing for the Wranglers is the best thing for his development. It's definitely the best thing for him going forward, in my opinion. Like, if the Flames knew that they could put him on waivers and he would clear and he got to play with the Wranglers, that would be the ideal situation, because then he can go down there,
100%.
play big minutes, get his game back. But you do run that risk of losing him for nothing. And I don't think you want to do that right now, because, just like listening to the Fan 960, like I've heard Pat mention that he thinks that Montreal could be a team that could put in a claim on him, because they've had a lot of interest in him in the past. So, does he get past a Montreal or one of those bottom feeders that has maybe some roster spots open? I don't know if he gets through. So it's really interesting. Out of those three options, I guess, what do you think would be the way to go with him right now?
He's not going to get through waivers. That being a first round draft pick, and a fairly recent one at that, that's still going to have some cachet around circles in the National Hockey League. Your Montreals, maybe your San Jose's, those type of teams are going to Chicago. Maybe the Montreal one's very fascinating. For me, it's the middle option you outlined there. He's going to be part of this roster because they don't want to lose him on waivers, but he's going to have to earn himself into this lineup, whether it's by showing in practice or you're going to get an injury somewhere along the lines. So for him to make this roster, he has to show he's better than Coronado, better than Honzik. He might have to unseat an Anthony Mantha still to make this roster. He's going to be better than Klapka. You have to add in the type of role you want these players to play as well. When you're factoring in where do you put him in this lineup, his 3 preseason games, you look at his stat line, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, one shot, 0, 0, 0. Like, I looked it up on NHL.com. He doesn't even have a hit. He doesn't have anything on that stat sheet other than one shot. That's just not good enough. And so I think he needs to go somewhere where he can find the confidence to play again. Why is he so tentative? Why can't he seize this moment? I don't want to call him a bust like a lot of people on Twitter are right now, but he's pushing a rock uphill, and it's a slippery slope because he could fall off real quick in a hurry here. I really think that you need to find a way to keep him around the NHL team and try to get him into this lineup. You have so many other guys playing better than him right now, showing they deserve to be there. Honzik's one example. We put out that conversation between us. Klapka's a good conversation starter to have there. Even a Kevin Rooney has shown a lot more than Jacob Pelche, and that's worrisome. But you also don't want to just lose the asset for nothing, putting him through waivers. It's a hard conversation to have with him.
Yeah, even a guy like Dryden Hunt has played better than him
100%.
in the preseason. So you're right, he's got work to do. And I'm kind of with you. I would keep him on the NHL roster to start the season, because you don't want to risk losing him like they lost Valimaki. And especially you don't want to lose him in order to keep Kevin Rooney, Dryden Hunt, Walker Dewar, those types of guys on the roster. Like, because those guys, they don't have a future, like a long-term future in Calgary, whereas Jacob Pelche might have a long-term future. So I do think you want to keep him on the roster. But yeah, as of right now, he has not earned a spot in the opening day lineup. One guy that has impressed and has kind of almost deserved to get a spot is Honzik, which is pretty amazing, because this is one of the craziest turnarounds I've ever seen, because after his second game in Penticton there, people were totally writing him off, saying this guy is just a total non-factor. He's invisible against junior players. All of a sudden, he comes into training camp, and he's like literally one of their best forwards, if not the best forward in training camp so far. So real good on Sam Honzik to step up and start to show why he was a first-round pick. And I've liked his game a lot. Like, I really like the size. Like, he's like a really big, strong, fast guy. He's good on the forecheck. He can protect pucks. He goes to the front of the net. He's shown that he's got, some pretty decent vision. He's been making some nice passes in the preseason. And he's got a decent shot too. So, I mean, I've really liked what I've seen from him. Is it enough to get a spot on the opening night roster? I don't know, because there's so many guys in the mix right now. There's a big logjam, and he doesn't have to go on waivers. And you don't really want to rush kids the age of Sam Honzek, especially after going through all those injuries last year. So the best course of action is to probably put him with the AHL Wranglers, have him play on the first line, first power play, maybe get him some PK time, just let him go down and develop. But if the Flames run into some injury issues or they run into some performance issues, Honzek's probably number one on that list to call up right now, kind of like Connor Zary was last season. It's actually pretty similar to Connor Zary, would you not say?
100%.
In terms of
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, for sure. Like, this guy's played 4 games, 6 points. He's +6. I know plus minus stats, but when you're plus every game, that's a big factor. 4 penalty minutes. He's even 20% on the faceoffs, and he has 14% shooting percentage right now. It leads the team in scoring in the preseason. Now, yes, it's preseason. Not everyone plays every game, but when you're a point per game player, you're getting a 20% shooting percentage almost. You're showing a lot of something. This guy has found his confidence, whatever that switch was between Penticton and in this training camp. He's found it, and he's shown that he deserves to be amongst these players. I'm much like you with this conversation, though. It's probably been enough for him to make this roster, but I think the best thing for him still is to go to the AHL, play in the high leverage situations, play in all situations, be a guy that the Wranglers count on to produce offense, to be part of the big picture in the Wrangler situation this season. Play the socks off this guy if you're in the American Hockey League. Let him just take the ball and run with it and see how much more development this guy can come through for this guy. He's lapping guys like Pelche. He's really put himself at the forefront of prospects for the Flames. This is the guy that Craig Conroy drafted when we all some of us, including myself, was like, wow, there's still lots of talent left on the board, Conroy. What are you doing with this pick? This is what Conroy saw when he picked this guy, a guy who can produce points, drive offense, and he's got a good opportunity when it comes to these next few preseason games. He's going to get a ton of minutes here. He's playing with Kadri in the next preseason game here. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch with that opportunity. Honzek has really been a great storyline in this preseason, just the way he's growing on this role, taking on this role, and has produced. And that's a big thing for me. Keep producing, keep playing hard, and he very well could see a lot of NHL action this year too if he continues to progress at this rate.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing I'll throw out there too is it's also only been 3 games. So like we also might want to kind of manage our expectations a little bit too.
For sure.
So like I know like a lot of people aren't really talking about that. Like people are just very excited about his positive play, which is awesome. But at the same time, it has been 3 games. So maybe we should kind of pump the brakes on Honzek a little bit. Like we don't want to put the expectations like way too high for him, saying that he's going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL this year. Like that's probably not going to happen, but it definitely has been, a really nice run for a guy that struggled last season. So it's great to see. To kind of wrap up this conversation with the forwards, like as of right now, I know there's still 3 preseason games to go. Like how do you see the lineup right now? Who is in your opening night lineup to start next week? Kind of based off of what you've seen in the preseason.
Yeah, your regulars are going to be like your Kadri, your Sharon Goviches, your Kuzmenko's going to make it, the Colemans are going to make it. So these fringe guys, I think Coronado's doing enough to make this opening roster, but he's got to finish these last 3 games at the same pace, the same intensity level to make this lineup. I also don't think it's a bad thing if Coronado goes and spends a couple of weeks in the American Hockey League to start. I'm in the minority there. If you read through Twitter or X, people are going to be all over me for that take, and that's fine because there's nothing and no harm in overdeveloping a couple of guys. So Honzek down, Coronado down. Let them play. Let them continue to have that confidence. You're going to get injuries. You're going to get struggles from players that NHL and then bring them up here. I think Klapka's done enough, and I'm going to put him in my opening day roster. I think he's going to be beside Rooney and Lomberg, who is a lock to make this roster as well. And I think there's a real conversation to have around a guy like does does Coronado does he make this roster? That's a big, real conversation. But I think you start him in the American Hockey League and wait for an opportunity in the top 9. Because right now, where in the top 9 do you slot Matthew Coronado over top of all these other wingers? That's just personally how I see it.
Yeah, the only way you do it is if you put Pospisil at center on the fourth line. And like I kind of wrote about that at Flames Nation, like what to do with Matt Coronado. And if you want him in the NHL, I think the best way to do it is to put Pospisil at center, like Lomberg and Klapka. And then you open up a wing spot, because you could move Connor Zary to center, you could move Sharon Govich to center. So then you open up a wing spot for Matt Coronado. And I think to start this season, that's what I would love to see. I'd love to see Connor Zary at center, Martin Pospisil at center. Those guys can be like your bottom 6 guys. And then you find a way to get Coronado on a wing, say with like a Backlund and Coleman as an example. Yep. I think that would be fantastic. I think the fans would love to see that. I think it would be good for Coronado. Now, I mean, like you said, these last 3 preseason games, he's still got to bring it. Because, I mean, we saw what happened last year. I mean, they made room for Coronado to start the year at the big club, and it didn't go very well. So, it's not a slam dunk that he's going to, be this huge producer at the NHL this year. But I think he's earned the right, and I think he's earned that roster spot based off his performance in the preseason so far. So, yeah, that whole thing with how they're going to fill the lineup here is going to be very, very interesting.
I agree. And I'd love to see Connor Zary at center too. Like, I really think he could drive Huberdeau and Mantha line together. He's responsible enough at both ends of the ice that you can count on him for a lot more. I don't think we're going to see a big sophomore slump from Zary. This is my big prediction for this guy. I think he's going to continue to progress. That's all he's ever done when he's been playing. Through his time through the Western Hockey League, we've seen him just progress. Through the AHL, he's just progressed. He took that job last year and ran with it. I think he's going to do the same thing this year. I'd love to see him at center. I know how the Flames think. I know how Huska thinks, and I just don't know if we're going to see it right away here because they really like that Pospisil at center with Huberdeau and Mantha. But we'll see we'll see if they stick with that at the moment here.
Yeah, and they like Rooney too, right? Like, I mean,
yes.
Conroy is the one that signed him last year. Yeah, and he's like one of their go-to defensive guys, go-to penalty killers, and coaches love those types of players. So it would not surprise me to see Rooney on the opening night roster, even though I wouldn't have him there. But
me neither. There's a very similar conversation to be had on the back end for the Flames, much like we have with the fourth line. The bottom pairing of this Flames roster through the extra defenseman or 2 is a fascinating conversation. You sent me a list of 6 guys that could potentially be in that. I think we're forgetting a Ball and a Bean are still part of that conversation. There's a lot of guys on the bottom part of this Flames depth chart on the back end. Robert, how do you see this playing out over the course of the end of this preseason here?
I guess it really depends on Kevin Ball if he's going to be healthy or not. So I would just say, for the sake of this conversation, let's say that he is healthy enough to start the season. I would say that Ball, Anderson, Uyghur, Miramana, Bean are slam dunks to be in the opening night lineup. So you got 5 there. And I really think Braden Pahal has done a fantastic job in the preseason. And I think he's coming very close to locking down that number 6 role if he hasn't already. I love like the physicality he brings. Like, he just brings a different element. He's been picking up some points in the preseason. He almost looks like a little bit of a different guy so far. So I've really liked his game, but then you just have this huge log jam, right? So you got your younger guys and you got your older guys. You got, guys like Grushnikov, Brstevich, Solovyov, who have stepped up and shown that these guys could probably play in the NHL this year, which is awesome for the Flames. But then you have your vets like Tyson Barrie, Jared Tenorti, Joel Hanley. So you got pretty much 6 guys going for like a number 7 or number 6 spot in the lineup right now, which is really interesting. So I'll throw it to you. I mean, I guess based off what you've seen in the preseason so far, who do you think should be on the roster as like the 6-7 guys, based off of performances so far?
Well, thank you for giving Pahal some love because I don't see it anywhere else in the world. I think Pahal is going to be part of that conversation in the 6-7. I think Tyson Barrie does get signed, and I think those guys go kind of in a rotational basis based on the opponent, based on who they're playing here. I think Pahal has passed guys like Hanley on the depth chart. Tenorti for me, I still don't understand the signing other than an AHL signing, but that's just me. He's a good guy to have in case of a rash of injuries. He can come up and he can fill a spot, but I don't see that he's done enough here to make my opening day roster. I would have loved to see a little bit more from Solovyov. I think he's been great. He's been good, but I need to see a little bit more. Pahal's doing what I thought Solovyov could have done in this preseason, and that's take the bull by the horn and really assert yourself as that next guy, as the sixth guy and part of this roster. Guys like Greshnikov and Brustevich, I'm going to give them the same treatment I give Hanzik. You've done a really good preseason, and you could definitely see games later in the season, but go down there and just get all the minutes, play all the situations, and continue to develop because you are having a fantastic preseason. I know people like to reward these guys coming out of camp. Let's reward them a little further down the lineup here and make them continue hungry for it, that they continue to work towards it. And that's just my little personal philosophy. If they stay hungry and they show you that they're still willing to work at it, that's the kind of player you want as part of your roster. But for me, I have Bean with Anderson and I have Ball anchoring a third pair because I think he can do a job of anchoring his own line and you can put him in a defensive situation. I have him with the rotational of Barry and Pahal at the moment, but that door is definitely still open for someone else to come take it. There's still time here for someone else to make an improvement on their situation.
So then you'd have guys like Tenorti and Hanley on waivers and send them
Yep.
to the minors. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Those
totally
are guys
fair.
those are guys you have on waivers all throughout the year. Like those like Flames did it last year with Hanley. He was on waivers. Oh, let's bring him in because we're going to lose a defenseman. Those are those kind of guys, great fill-in guys, but they're not everyday NHLers for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, I think those guys could be pretty valuable with the Wranglers because that Wrangler team is super young on the blue line, like crazy young. Because you got Brustevich, Solovyov, Grushnikov, Kuznetsov, Poirier. Like you got a lot of young guys down there. So having a Tenorti, having a Hanley down there as kind of a veteran presence would probably be pretty helpful for them. So I like that idea. I'm kind of with you as of right now. I would say my 6-7 Pahal. If like the season were to start today, Pahal is my number 6 all day long. And then that 7, I would probably say it would be like a Tyson Barrie or Ilya Solovyov. I'm curious. So like when the Flames first brought in Barrie, I was like, that kind of makes sense. Like, he could be like a power play 2 quarterback, veteran guy, like good in the room, like just little things like that a kind of retooling younger team could use. But as the preseason's gone on and all these guys have emerged, I'm like, I don't really know if there's a fit for Tyson Barrie anymore on this team. Do you see it the same way, or do you think the Flames should sign him to a contract?
I don't think they should, but I think they still will. I think they like his veteran presence. I think they like what he brings on the power play. And we have to remember, too, they're also in the asset control business. So if he can produce at a good level and get himself back to being a viable defenseman, someone might come calling at the trade deadline. So I think there's a couple of tiers here. I don't sign him personally because I like what I've seen out of Solovyov and Grechnikov and those guys. And you still have Hanley if everything else fails that could come in here. But I think the Flames still will because I think they value what he can still bring to a locker room. We've heard that culture word thrown out a lot, and that's really big for the Flames right now. They're trying to build themselves a new culture here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but yeah, I don't really know if I totally see the fit, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with him.
Barry for me is like the Rooney. Barry for me, sorry to cut you off there. Barry for me is like the Rooney conversation. We understand why he's there and what the Flames might see in him, but at the same time, it's like if you're playing the NHL video game, not a chance he's going to be on your roster.
Yeah, and there's like kind of 2 things that come to mind with Barry is so like there's the idea that he's going to quarterback your second power play unit, but then that means he's taking minutes away from a guy like Rasmus Anderson. And like what sort of message does that send to Rasmus, a guy who's been here for 6-7 years now? All of a sudden you're going to give his power play time to a PTO veteran like Tyson Barrie. I don't know how well that would go over with a guy like him. And then the other thing too is, I mean, you brought up, could you get an asset for him? But like the Nashville Predators tried, I believe, like pretty hard to get rid of him last year and bring in a draft pick for him, and there was just no market for him. So, if there was no market for him then, and now he's a year older, being a number 6, number 7 on the Flames, not getting a lot of ice time, probably on a mediocre, bad team. Like I don't even know if the Flames would be able to get anything for him either. So
it depends what kind of season you can put together, right? He was not having a good time in Nashville.
And I think a reason for that is because he wasn't getting ice time. Does he get ice time in
Yeah,
Calgary?
fair,
Because I
fair.
mean, I think Pahal has outplayed him by quite a bit in the preseason so
Agreed.
far, and he fills a role that I think the team needs with some
Mhm,
physicality on the back end.
for sure. I agree with that. You speak of the power play, so why not we talk about the power play here? That conversation of the defenseman will continue to go through the end of training camp here. But how do you see power play one shaping up? I kind of hot taked it last week on the show, and I've gotten some feedback from people. Yeah, I took runs at Huberdeau. How do you see power play one shaping up? Before I give you mine, I want to hear yours and your rationale behind it. See if you can convince me to put Huberdeau on power play one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so I was kind of just like playing around with some different configurations, and I come to the conclusion there's 4 guys that are locks to be on that first unit. So that's Kuzmenko and Kadri, and they kind of work down low with each other like they did at the end of last season. Like they were dynamic in those spots. I have Sharon Govich on his off wing to hit one timers and rip pucks from that area, and then I have Mackenzie Weegar as the defenseman at the top.
Okay.
I've noticed at the end of last season in the preseason here, he was doing a really good job on the power play of getting pucks through, like just getting wrist shots through that are very tippable, that kind of can find its way through screens. Like I think he has like a really good ability to get pucks to the net, which not all
Mm-hmm.
defensemen do. So, and he's a good playmaker too. So I like him up top there. So then there's like that one spot that's open, and I think there's a bunch of different guys you could put there. So it's probably on the right side. So you could either have maybe a guy like Anthony Mantha who could shoot pucks. He's a lefty, so he wouldn't be able to get some one timers off. He'd be on his strong side there, so he'd have to kind of corral pucks on his strong side and shoot, which isn't easy to do. But then you could have Matt Coronado there who could shoot on his off wing, so like he could rip one timers and shoot pucks kind of like Sharon Govich on the other side, or you can have Huberdeau there to try and make plays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting. So out of that group of 3, I think I would start with Huberdeau and just see if he can somehow regain that magic that he had in Florida. I wouldn't give him much of a leash though. I'll say that much, but I think I would maybe start there. So kind of to recap all that, I would say Kuzmenko, Kadri down low, Sharon Govich, Huberdeau on the flanks, and then Weegar up top, I think would be how I would start it. Where are you going with yours?
I have the same 4 that I think are going to make that roster. 100% probably set in stone. Those 4 are gonna be there. That's your Kuzmenko, your Sharon Govich, your Kadri, and I think it's Weegar. I hummed and hawed over Miramanoff instead of Weegar based on the skill set, but I think a Miramanoff on the second power play unit, that's a good quarterback to have, and so that's where I put him. I put Huberdeau on power play 2. I have him there with his buddy Mantha and see if they can find some magic on a power play on a second unit where they can run it. That's how I have it. I hummed and hawed over Connor Zary being that 5th guy.
Okay, that's interesting.
The way that he's progressed in his shot, in his ability to be responsible in the roles that are asked for him, he's taken everything on and has excelled at it. I wonder if that is a key to helping this power play. This guy can still pass very, very well. He's got great vision. He can finish. We all know that. And he can be kind of a floater on that power play. He can go down low. He can play up high. He can play on either side. Yeah, you take away some of the one-timer thing, but that's not the be-all and end-all for me on a power play when you have other guys like Kuzmenko and Sharon Govich that can be set up to do those type of things. I just wonder about a Connor Zary on that thing. Now, the Flames are probably going to go Huberdeau, but I'm going to go put Zary on my first power play just because I think there's a lot of skill sets that can be used from that one player and the different spots that he can play for the Flames forward group. And then go let Huberdeau play power play 2. Put him with Anthony Mantha, a guy who can score, Coronado, a guy who can score as well, and then let Miramanoff quarterback that power play. That's kind of how I play it out in my brain.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there were a few games last season where Zary was on the power play where he was like the Flames' most dynamic puck mover. The one game that comes to mind was in Edmonton. Remember that night? So it was a Saturday night. The Flames beat the Oilers like 4-5-2. Coleman and Janmark got in that crazy fight.
I do.
Connor Zary was lights out that night, especially on the power play. He was just making some ridiculous cross ice passes, and I was thinking to myself, like, man, like I kind of want to see that maybe on the top unit. So I like that. I think I would just give the benefit of the doubt to Huberdeau to start, but
Yeah,
like I
I
said,
understand that.
short leash, and Zary would probably be next guy up, or even Coronado potentially if they want another shooting option
Mhm.
there. So there's lots of different configurations they can go with here. It is going to be interesting to see if Huberdeau can regain a little bit of that magic. I mean, I think he's looked pretty good in the preseason so far. Like, he was good in Edmonton. I thought he
Mhm.
was pretty solid on Saturday for the most part. So it is going to be pretty fascinating. But I love Kadri and Kuzmenko down low. Those two
Yeah,
were elite together. And the crazy thing about the Flames power play is from March 19th to the end of the season, they had the best power play in the NHL.
it was so good.
It was crazy. It was I believe it was like hovering around 30%. So
Yeah, it was
it was just
ridiculous.
wild that they could go from having a bottom 5 power play the whole season, and then with like a month left in the year, they can go to the best power play in the league. Like, it was crazy. So it's going to be super interesting to see if like Kuzmenko and Uyghur can carry on that momentum. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Flames are going to be better than most people think this year, is because I think they're going to have like a good power play. I don't think they're going to be in the bottom. I think they'll probably be in the top half of the league. That's my kind of bold prediction with that. So
I like
it's going to be fun to watch.
it's hard not to be excited when you see what they did at the end of last season with their power play, and going into this season, you think, wait, hold on, we got a couple more shooters on this roster. We have a guy in Zary whose skill set of passing the puck is a little bit underrated for me amongst Flame fans in the NHL. Like, there's a lot of options for the Flames to go here, and you look at it and you boil it down, they really could have two good units rather than try to load up
Mm-hmm.
one unit like it's been for a long time in Calgary. You've got 3, 4 defensemen that you can list off that can run a power play and probably be effective in doing so with your Uyghurs, your Manoffs, your Andersons, and pending who else makes this roster.
Yeah, maybe
It's
Barry.
quite maybe Barry. Like, it's quite interesting to see how the Flames work it, and they have a new guy running the power play on the bench as well. And so coaching does affect your power play a little bit. It's gonna be fascinating how it plays out as well here. Um, we want to continue talking about the power play. We can't. If you have anything more to add, go ahead and add it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Zane Perakh. He was reassigned to the OHL here. He's gone back. He's played a game since he's been back. He looked pretty good for Saginaw for what I saw of that hockey game. But we talked when he was in Penticton and talked around the Flames here, and we talked a little bit about how we don't want to call it a bad attitude, but it was almost a cocky attitude, like I'm here, I'm the best, I'm better than everyone. And he seemed to struggle through Penticton, and he even admitted himself that first practice in Calgary that he was really bad. That press conference when he was sent back to the OHL and the maturity that he showed got me really excited for this player for the future of the Flames, where he can admit his faults. He seemed to have been humbled by the experience of being in Calgary and has really changed my outlook on this player. I knew he was going to be a great hockey player, but now I really like what I'm seeing from this guy on the mental side of the game and his approach to being a member of the Calgary Flames. Going back to Saginaw, saying that this is my opportunity now to perfect my game so I can make the roster next year, and using this reassignment to the OHL has motivation for next season. I'm interested on your take on what you've seen from Perakh, because that was a really eye-opening press conference for me.
That was eye opening, and I think like you and I were probably like two of the people in the market that were probably hardest on him for
Yep.
his attitude. I think a lot of people were very complimentary about his attitude. But I think you and I we were just a little concerned that he was on that edge of being cocky instead of confident.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was like a little concerning heading into camp. But man, that exit interview that he did before heading back to Saginaw was night and day compared to the one he did before Penticton. It was actually, it almost seemed like it was two different people. It was pretty
Yeah.
wild because the one before Penticton, I know we talked about in the first episode, but I believe the quote was like, "I know I'm the most confident person in any room I walk into." Like, he just had that very sort of cocky attitude. But then the first thing he said in his exit interview to go back to the OHL was that was a very humbling experience. And I was like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? It sounds like he's learning, he's maturing, he kind of understands just how good the NHL is, just how good these players are. And I think that was a super, super positive thing for him to take back to the OHL, and give him all the credit in the world for learning that and
Mm-hmm.
taking it on the chin, you know, accepting the fact that he did struggle, and just taking that into the OHL this season and learning and hopefully growing and come back next year or the year after to make the Calgary Flames. And it just, like I said, showed a lot of maturity, showed a lot of growth. I was very impressed by him, and I'm kind of like with you. My outlook on him has changed a little bit since that interview. I'm a lot more confident that he's going to come back next year and be ready to go.
It takes a lot to swallow your pride and admit that you're wrong, and it takes a strong person to take that and learn from it. And he showed great growth in that way, that he's willing to hold on. I need to learn these lessons. I realize I need to learn these lessons, and to take that as motivation rather than get down on yourself. Because a lot of people, they'll take that and they'll be, oh, and they'll sigh and they'll be down on themselves for a while. He took it and he was very upbeat in that press conference. You can see this humility, but he was still upbeat. He was still himself, knowing, hey, I've learned some things here that I can take back with me. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he runs away with the scoring title among defensemen in the OHL again, and just leads his team purely by his will and his skill to have good playoff success again with the Spirit. Like, that's a really good hockey team they have there as well. It's good to see from your prospects that when they come to camp here, they realize situations, they learn from their situations, and they move past them and become better people for it. And it's not only about being a good hockey player, it's about becoming a good person as well. And I think we're really seeing that from Zane Perakh. So I wanted to make sure we talked about him and gave him a ton of credit for the job that he's done in training camp here. And hopefully he really does kick some ass with the Spirit, because it'd be nice to see him play a deep playoff run again, and maybe another Memorial Cup berth for that team. It's a great hockey team. Really good hockey team they have down there.
And a spot in the World Junior roster would be awesome too. I'd love to watch him over the holidays. That would be a lot of fun.
It would be a lot of fun. All right, this next one's all you. You brought this one up to me. You wanted to talk a little bit about Anthony Mantha here, and so I'm gonna step aside here and give you the mic.
Well, yeah, I mean, just when I was watching that game on Saturday, like actually, I was talking to my brother about this. Like, Anthony Mantha, he's one of those guys where when he's on his game, like, you think to yourself, like, this guy could be like a point per game, 40 goal scorer beast, because of how skilled he is, how big he is, how good his shot is. Like, he has all the talent in the world, but then there are some nights where you're watching, you're like, I don't even know he's playing. So, like, just kind of thinking about that, and just I was almost wondering, I was asking myself, like was signing Anthony Mantha really necessary for the Flames to do? Because, like, when you take a look at it from like a macro view, the Flames are rebuilding. This is the time right now where they should probably be prioritizing getting young players in the lineup and developing them in positions to succeed. Look no further than Matt Coronado right now, because Anthony Mantha is probably going to be playing on the right wing in the top 9, and is essentially, depending on what they do with Pospisil, but he's almost kind of blocking a spot for a young forward in the top 9 right now. So I was almost just kind of thinking in my head, like, was signing him really that necessary? Like, I'm curious, like, what you think about the whole Mantha signing now that we're in preseason and we're seeing Matt Coronado step up and play really well.
When they signed Anthony Mantha, I got it. I'm like, okay, this is a guy who can come in here. There's some internal competition. You're not just handing a job for these young guys. You're not just saying, okay, Coronado, this is your job to have. So I understand why they did it, and I understand questioning that signing as well from the fan side of things. Personally, I don't mind they signed Anthony Mantha, but they need to realize that if he's being outplayed, that he deserves to be in the press box. And a guy like Coronado does deserve that spot in the lineup. And as of right now, if I was calling the shots, that might be the way that I go with that opening day roster. He might find himself in the press box. Now, he does have 2 points in 2 preseason games, so there's that going for him. So I don't mind that they signed him. It wasn't 100% necessary either, but you have to make sure that you play. That's kind of they're trying to play both sides of the fence here, not handing kids jobs and providing them competition to get those jobs, but they brought in a guy who's regularly in the lineup, and he is an NHLer. When he's on his game, he looks really good. I don't know. It's a hard one for me because I understand it, but I also understand questioning the signing in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason they brought him in essentially was to get Jonathan Huberdeau going, because, like, I know, like, at Craig Conroy's. How come you hate that? I mean, because Jonathan Huberdeau, like, he's $10.5 million man. I mean, like, the idea that, like, you want to get him going I mean, he's still got 7 years left on that contract. So, like, I guess
No,
why
this
do
is
you
gonna
think that?
You're just setting me up to take more runs at Huberdeau again this week. You have a $10.5 million player, and you know that he's not a line driver, and so you're taking money to throw at bad money. Is essentially what you're doing for me. That's how I look at it. This is a guy who needs to fit in. At a certain point, it's on the player. You just can't keep going out there and saying, "This is your guy." Okay, no, this is your guy. Hold on, we finally found your guy. Oh, one more guy. Okay, let's go handpick this. At a certain point, it's like you have had really good centers with you. You've had great hockey players with you. Figure it out a little bit in your own ways. At a certain point, it's on Huberdeau to be determined to fit in and to provide more for the team. I'm not saying he doesn't care, because I know he does care, but at a certain point, it's on the player in of itself. The 2 years we've heard of go get Anthony Declare, I hated every second of those conversations I ever had with anybody online on my podcast, because it made no sense to me. He had one good season with Duclair, and people were calling for this guy to be the answer to Huberdeau. Now they're doing the same thing with Mantha. At a certain point in time, it's up to Huberdeau to fit in, rather than the Flames continually throw money after money after money to try and fix a problem.
Yeah, I like that take a lot, because I mean they've literally played Jonathan Huberdeau with every forward on the roster. I mean, they tried him with Elias Lindholm, didn't work. They tried him with Tyler Toffoli, didn't work. They tried Michael Backlund, didn't work. They're trying with Nazem Kadri, didn't work. So it really, it does come down to Huberdeau. At some point, you got to say, like, what's the problem here? Is it the guys with Huberdeau, or is it Hubie? And because he hasn't worked with anybody, it's him. It's totally on him. So I get that take for sure.
Jump back in here. Is a Sharon Govich or a Connor Zary that much different than a Duclair? Like what are we doing here? Is Kadri that much different from a Sam Bennett in the style of how they play the hockey game? It's not the style for me right now. It's the willingness to fit into a different system. It was run and gun in Florida. It still is run and gun in Florida to this day. That's how they won the Stanley Cup. That's what he's done for years in Florida. In Calgary, it's not run and gun. You have to change your game. And you willingly signed an 8-year contract to be in Calgary. Sure, I'd sign $10.5 million if it was thrown in front of my face too. But at the same time, do you want to be miserable for 8 years while you go through that and get that money? Or do you want to have a little bit of fun and success with it? I love Jonathan Huberdeau. I do. But at a certain point in time, come on, man, you've got to show us a little something. You've got to take a step yourself and show it. So I get the signing Anthony Mantha for the competition side of things. I hate that it would be a reason that they sign him just for Jonathan Huberdeau, because that literally makes no sense. You can't tell me Coronado's any worse than Anthony Mantha.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out this year, but I mean, I think that's the rationale the Flames are using, because like Craig Conroy came out in his end-of-year press conference and said, like, we need to find help for Jonathan Huberdeau, and I think Mantha was the guy. I mean, they trained together in the off season. They're friends. They're both French. I mean, there could be a relationship there that might spark him potentially. Who knows? But let's see it 100%. But yeah, I guess we'll see how it goes. It's a 1-year contract. It's for $3 million bucks, and likely in the end, if Mantha has a good season, kind of like he did last year, maybe he can fetch a draft pick or two. The Vegas Golden Knights, they gave up a second and a fourth round pick to get him from Washington last year, but Mantha had scored 20 goals in 56 games with the Capitals. So, can he replicate that with Calgary? Can they get that same return? Maybe we'll find out. But yeah, it just kind of feels like it was almost a little unnecessary, because the Flames, they say they're trying to make the playoffs, but I mean, based off all the transactions that they've done over the last year and a half, they're clearly rebuilding, retooling. So I think they're okay probably not making it. So just adding a guy like Mantha, especially on the wings, like when you look at the Flames depth chart, the wings are probably where they're the strongest in their prospect pool.
Easy.
Especially prior to all the moves Craig Conroy did on defense. But, like I said, you're kind of blocking somebody. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see, but I don't think Ryan Huska is going to be scared to bench Mantha if he's not playing well and put a guy like Coronado in there. I mean, he showed that last season. Like he's pretty lenient with his ice time, right?
Yep. He did. He benched Huberdeau for the full third period. He saw other guys in the press box who we didn't expect to see. So I like what Ryan Huska brings to the bench, and I know he takes it in the teeth on Twitter sometimes for some of the decisions he does make. But if you realize what Huska's trying to do here, he's trying to teach accountability. He's trying to show that he, as a first-time NHL head coach, can handle an NHL bench. And so he's doing a lot of things to get his name out there. And this is an addition for him to continue to coach in the National Hockey League as well. Like, it's not going to be well if he continues just to lose and lose and lose. He wants to win as well. And so when he shows that ability to scratch a player or sit them down for the third period, I think that sends a strong message. And hopefully he continues that, and we can probably see that this year. And if I'm Anthony Mantha and I've got 20 goals, that means, and I'm playing with Huberdeau, that probably means Huberdeau's having a decent season as well. And I'll definitely take that if that ends up being. But you've got to continue to earn that job if you're Anthony Mantha. I don't think he should be a for sure NHLer, everyday NHLer. I think he should always have to continually earn that job. And don't be afraid to scratch the guy. If a guy like Coronado deserves a spot, let's make the switch.
Yeah, and like out of all the guys who are penciled in that top 9, I think he's the guy that's like closest to being out of that top 9, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Unless, like I said, unless you put Pospisil on the fourth line, which it doesn't look like they're going to do. But yeah, it seems like Mantha's kind of the guy that's right on that edge of being the odd man out because of his contract and because of his playing style a little bit too.
I think a Conroy Huska lineup looks a lot different than a John and Robert opening day roster based on a couple of small takes we would take. You understand why the Flames do things like Rooney and Mantha and Barry, but you also see on the flip side, like why? If you're going to be a playoff team and you think you're going to be a playoff team, even if they somehow squeak into the 8th spot in a playoff team, how quick is that series going to be? It's going to be the Darryl Sutter waste of 8 days because you're going to go up against a Edmonton, a Colorado, or any of those teams that have all that elite skill on their roster. And it could be a quick exit. If you're a Flames team like this, just trying to squeak in. Don't rush a rebuild. Don't rush a retool. Let it naturally happen. And it does suck losing hockey games. It does suck watching losing hockey, but you can still be a competitive roster while you're rebuilding. And I think fans would be okay with the competitiveness if they see the end goal here. And that's where the Anthony Mantha signing might put a little bit of doubt in people's minds, where we're just going to try to chase this mediocre middle ground again rather than actually just commit to this rebuild here.
Yeah.
Fair question. Fair question by you.
One thing it's kind of a little bit off topic, but talking about competitiveness, one thing I do like the Flames, like one thing I like that they're doing right now with their lineup is that, they're not going to be like a great team, but they are going to be competitive and they're not going to get pushed around this year, which I really like, because I don't think there's anything worse than being a fan of a hockey team that's kind of near the bottom of the standings and getting pushed around at the same time. Like that just pisses me off. And I don't think
feels like a shot at the Coyotes.
It's a definite shot at the Coyotes.
Maybe a little bit at San Jose last year too. Gross.
Even but like when you go back to like the 13-14 season with the Flames when they were rebuilding, they had Brian McGrattan and they had Kevin Westgard. Like they weren't going to get pushed around. I always liked that. I'm kind of seeing that with this lineup right now with guys like Klapka, Lomberg, Pospisil, Ball, Pahal, like Uyghur and Anderson aren't easy to play against. Kadri, Coleman, those guys aren't easy to play against. Like I'm liking kind of the identity that they're building right now.
Yeah, I like it. A nice mix of skill and size, and having the ability to have guys that can play smaller as well in your lineup here. We speak about this competitiveness. We speak about what these players are doing or not doing, and who we'd like to see in the lineup and out of the lineup. We got 3 preseason games left, Robert. What are your expectations for the Flames? What would you like to see over this final just under a week here until we actually get real games?
Yeah, I'm not putting really like any stock into it for the veteran players, to be honest. I mean, I think these guys are just trying to get through healthy. I mean, we've seen throughout the preseason so far some pretty big names get injured. So, like Patrick Laine, Drew Doughty, you want to avoid that as much as possible. So, you hope those guys come out healthy. But in terms of things I'll be looking for, that forward spot battle between, it's pretty much Pelletier, Coronado, Klapka, Honzig. I'm really looking forward to watching those 4 in particular. See if those guys can really, secure their spot on the opening night roster. But I think the most fascinating thing might be the goaltending battle, because all of Vladar, Cooley, and Wolf have played well so far. Like none of them have given the Flames an excuse to either put them on waivers, put them to the AHL. Like they're all kind of in the same boat right now. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see what happens there. It's feeling like it's going to be a Vladar Wolf tandem to start the year. That's just based off like what you listen to on the radio and the articles you read, what you're hearing. It sounds like that's kind of the way it's going to go. But, Devin Cooley has been very good in the preseason so far. Like he stole that game in Edmonton, like literally stole that game. I don't know if people realize just how good he was that night. And on Saturday, he went 10 for 10.
They don't, because I get it on Twitter all the time still.
Yeah, and the game was like, I think it was on like Oilers Plus, and there was like no really way to watch it, right? So it was tough for fans to see what was going on. But like by all accounts, all reports by people who were there, it was like insane the show that Cooley was putting on, because he was stopping guys like McDavid, Hyman, Draisaitl. Like they had a stacked lineup, and he literally kept the Flames in that game. So I think those are the things I'm going to be looking for. Are there any different storylines that you have, or are you kind of thinking the same thing right now?
For me, it's all about the finish. And what I mean by that is there are certain guys trying to find a job. Can they finish their audition strong? Can you finish, if you're Devin Cooley, can you finish your last game, wherever you get to play, with a strong performance to show that you should be one of those goaltenders? Does a Hanzik finish strong in the preseason and push for the NHL job? Those are the kind of things I'm looking for. I don't care about the victory or the loss. I don't care about any of that kind of stuff. Although wins are fun, yes. It's all about the compete, and can you finish what your goal was going into this training camp, this preseason? And there's a number of guys we've listed and talked about a lot of them on this show today, who are just needing to finish off. Coronado has 3 more strong games. No doubt they'll find a spot for him on this roster. If Grechnikov goes out there and becomes Scott Stevens and finishes that, there's no doubt they'll find a spot on the roster for him. If these guys can finish what they've started, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm watching. Who has the ability to be what we call clutch in their situation that they're after here coming down the stretch? Because there's 3 games left and a lot of opportunities still ahead for all of these guys here, from all the way from Huberdeau to Cooley on this roster. Lots of guys have an opportunity here to put their stamp on their spot on this roster, and let's see what they got there.
When it comes to the goaltending, are you still on team Wolf and Cooley as the tandem to start the season?
I am, but it's hard to discard Vladar like I did earlier in the preseason, like we were talking about in previous episodes here. I pretty much had resigned myself. Come on, it's going to be Vladar. It's going to be the third guy. I really feel the Flames are going to start with 3 guys on their roster and make the decision a week or 2 into the season after they get NHL regular season games here. Because Vladar's done nothing but win hockey games. He's done nothing but stop the puck and look very steady in doing so. I still am on the Cooley wagon because I'm drinking that Kool-Aid still, but Vladar's done nothing to displace himself from that conversation for me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I wrote that article at Flames Nation saying that I think it should be Cooley and Wolf, and it was more. It wasn't so much about like Vladar's performance in the preseason or anything like that. It was just more about the long-term outlook of the position, because I still don't see Vladar as your number one. I just don't, based off what I've seen in the last 3 years. Like even in 21-22, when the Flames had that historic season, I still thought he was pretty mediocre numbers, despite the fact that he was on, had the best defensive team in front of him.
Yeah.
And had a ton of run support too, right? So I think Vladar could be that backup, could be that 1B. I think he's an NHL goalie. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he's an NHL goalie. Yep. But for some reason, like, I haven't seen a lot of Cooley, but like, based off everything you hear from guys like Kevin Woodley and people you hear from in the Flames organization, like, they love Cooley's upside. Like, they think that this guy could be a starter. And, I don't really know if you hear the same things about Vladar being a starting goalie in the league. So, and like I was taking a look just before the show here, maybe some teams that could use a Dan Vladar, like whether they could maybe make a trade.
Boston?
Yeah, I got Boston on my list because of Swayman. But like,
it's such a
it'd be hard, man. It's hard to make that move because Vladar makes like $2.2 million, and there's a lot of teams up against the cap, and it's a lot of money to be paying a backup goalie. But like, the only teams I could really think of were Anaheim, because John Gibson's out. Edmonton could use Vladar over Pickard, but they have cap issues. If LA runs into issues with Copley or Riddick, maybe they could go after a guy like Vladar. Like, Colorado needs a backup, but they have cap issues. So like, man, it's hard. It's complicated. It's hard. It's difficult. So, but just when I look at the long-term future of the Calgary Flames, like I said, Vladar's a UFA at the end of the year. I don't even think he's going to want to re-sign in Calgary based off of Cooley and Wolf being here. And I think Wolf and Cooley, based off like what I hear and what I see, I think their upside is just a little higher than Vladar. So I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world to see him on waivers or to see him traded.
And there is a 50-50 chance this guy does not get claimed off waivers. Even if you do waive him, hey, Dan, we're going to put you down with the Wranglers. Go play for a couple of weeks straight here and get your game together. And maybe a team does offer you something down the line here for a Dan Vladar. A lot of these teams are in very similar situations to Calgary where they have that third guy they really, really, really like and they don't want to lose them. And so you might be able to sneak him through waivers still at this point. And who knows? Maybe Swayman doesn't come back for Boston and they have to look elsewhere and bring back Dan Vladar, something like that. Look at Toronto's goaltending. Are you really sold on what they have in their tandem? They seem to think so for some reason. There are going to be options out there. There's going to be injuries out there that if the Flames can have these three guys and have these three guys playing how they're playing right now, they might be in a good position to capitalize on that down the road here. And there's nothing negative against Vladar or any of these other guys and how they're playing. It's just that's the business side of the game here. And you can facilitate a Dan Vladar move. I know you don't like using them if you don't want to, but you do have the retention spots. Dan Vladar at half the money is a very interesting commodity for a team looking for a backup goaltender. Could help a situation like in Colorado where they have cap problems. Well, give us a bottom player off your roster and you can have Dan Vladar type of thing. And there's something to work out there. Interesting how it'll play out. It'd be interesting how it plays out here with the last 3 preseason games. I wonder if each guy gets a game to play and to show what they have left.
Yeah. And like the thing is, like, we're not saying like bad things about Vladar. Like, I'm literally saying he's a backup goalie in the NHL.
Yep.
It could be like a 1B. That's not an insult at all, like whatsoever. So yeah.
Well, those are playoff teams. We just listed off playoff teams looking for a goaltender, right? We're not talking about Chicago or San Jose coming here taking a flyer on this guy. We're talking about Boston and Colorado and Toronto. Anaheim's looking to take a step. Teams that are looking to take a step or be a playoff team. And that's high praise for a guy like Vladar if that helps solidify their goaltending situation.
For sure. Yeah. And just like when I wrote that article, some of the feedback was pretty interesting. Like a lot of Flames fans out there really like Dan Vladar. Like it sounds like a lot of fans think that like he could be a potential starter in the future. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out with him and just the whole goaltending situation in general.
Yeah, I agree with you. We are coming up on the hour. Robert, is there anything else you wanted to bring up on the show, bring up on the podcast, or I think we're good for one more week here?
Yeah, dude, I think we're good. We touched on a lot of different things today. And I think by this time next week when we do the show, rosters will be in. So we'll get answers to a lot of these questions and we can kind of dissect all those decisions, which is going to be a lot of fun.
You folks out there can tell us how dumb we are in the comments or how smart we are in the comments. And then the Flames will prove that next week when they release the rosters and show how dumb we actually are. Good news for you podcast fans on Amazon Music. The Red Mile Rundown is now available through Amazon. So it's now Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube where you can find this show. You can also find it on social media at Red Mile Rundown. You can both Robert and I's handles have been on the screen all show long at Vintage Johnny 84 and at Ring of Fire CGY. Also, Robert has some very interesting articles. Robert, tell them what you have up on Flames Nation and where they can find it.
Yeah. Go to flamesnation.ca. I have that Dan Vladar article that seemed to really piss people off or people agreed with me. It really depends where you are in the spectrum there. So it was a great discussion starter. And then I also dropped an article on Saturday about what the Flames should do with Matt Coronado. We kind of touched on a little bit in the episode today, but to get kind of a full-on breakdown of that whole situation, go to flamesnation.ca and check it out.
Half the battle of a good article or podcast is half the people have to yell at you that you're an idiot, and that's how you know you've had a good article out. That's how I've deemed it. When people come at me on my show about how bad I looked or how bad I sounded, perfect. I've done my job, and that's what you want. You want conversation starters when you do these kind of things.
You want emotion. You want conversation. Absolutely.
Yes. And that's what makes Eric Francis good for all those who hate on Eric Francis. That's why he's still around and does what he does, because people hate what he does and they talk about it, and it sells newspapers at the time, and now it sells his articles online. That's what you want. And so good job on you, Robert. I like both articles, by the way. And thank you so much for everyone for making us part of your podcast rotations every Tuesday morning to your inbox or your podcast platform. Like, subscribe, and comment. We appreciate you. We will see you all next week on the Red Mile Rundown.